Recently, there's been a lot in the news concerning public restrooms, locker rooms, and who gets to walk through the men's and women's door. To some, this might seem like a trite and meaningless conflict about nothing. Others may wonder what is so important about this. One thing to remember is that there are two sides fighting, both of which see the importance of the thing. But in order to understand the purpose of any particular battle, one needs to zoom back and look at the big picture. That's what I want to do today. Many of the topics broached in this presentation could be the subject of whole videos in their own right, but what I'm trying to do is give an outline of the key themes. The broader context of this conflict is regarding something called human ontology. Ontology means the area of philosophy dealing with being or essences or natures. So human ontology is looking at a human being and asking, what is this? What is the proper understanding of the nature of a human? One of the key questions in this discussion is the role of the attributes of the mind and body, psyche and physiology, anatomy and self-identity. There's many different ways of saying it. But as we saw recently in the famous internet phenomenon of the dress and many other optical illusions, different people can look at the same data and come away with very different interpretations. There are two dominant ways of placing these aspects of human nature into a framework of human ontology. I call them the unitive view and the operator view. First, let's look at the unitive view. The unitive view is one which I regard as being the more natural and intuitive one. It sees the mind and the body as coming together to form one unified whole, a human being. I make the comparison to the sides and angles of a triangle. A triangle is not just the sides, nor is it just the angles, it's the union of the two. Similarly, we regard the human being as a single nature which is comprised both of mind and body. Next, there is a twofold expression of human nature, male and female, boy and girl, man and woman, masculine and feminine. And the way you can tell one from the other is by looking at the body. The body, being a true part of who you are, is going to tell the truth about what a person is. So for instance, when a friend has a baby and says, it's a boy, that's not just an assignment made from the outside arbitrarily, that is a real concrete observation about what the baby is. The reason why you see the anatomy of the boy is because the baby is, in fact, a boy. That's what he is. This framework has formed naturally and intuitively in every human society. They have all developed the words for these concepts of boy and girl, man and woman. And if you went to any one of these cultures in the world, and even back through time, and said their word for boy and girl, man or woman, everyone would know what to imagine in their heads, because this has always been considered a bodily reality of the nature of a person. And I regard this as the view that you have to be educated out of. There are generally two objections raised to this point of view. The first is the phenomenon known as hermaphrodism, but is more commonly known today as the intersex condition. There are different definitions for what intersex means, and there's different likelihoods of children receiving this condition, but in general, it's generally regarded as being present in one out of every few thousand children. In this condition, a baby is born with a mix of male and female parts and sometimes chromosomes. How do we understand this from the unitive perspective? I make the following comparison. We know that the human species is bipedal, that is to say, we walk upright on two legs. But suppose there's a baby who's born with no legs. Does that compel us to rethink the whole classification of the human race as bipedal? Well, no. We just have to recognize that birth defects are an unfortunate part of the human condition. The other objection is a phenomenon once known as gender identity disorder, and is also known today as gender dysphoria and transgenderism. In this instance, a person has unambiguously male body, but his psyche feels at odds with his anatomy, and he believes himself to have been born in the wrong body. And for this reason, he believes himself to be a woman and even desires surgery to simulate the female body as best as possible. Everyone agrees this is a real problem and a source of suffering for a person. What is disputed is what it means and how it ought to be interpreted and what should be done to help. From the unitive view, you are looking at a man with a psychological or psychiatric issue who needs help reconciling with his own body. And if treatments are not proving effective, that is not a reason to give up. Many psychological issues do not have complete cures. There's no cure, for instance, for depression, but we keep looking for what works for each individual. And when we speak of mental illness, we should not speak of it glibly or as an insult. Many people suffer with mental illness all their lives, and this should not be a source of stigma or shame. At the same time, we have to recognize that the psychology of a human being can be subject to any number of conditions of false belief, and that a person's body, in this instance, is healthy. So it stands to reason that we should not begin making radical and permanent alterations to a healthy body. The real goal, from the unitive point of view, should be helping people make peace with their bodies. Now let's talk about the operator philosophy of human ontology, which was given to us by modern gender theory. I call it that because of the way it treats the mind like an operator in a squishy vehicle. It proposes that a human being is a mind. That is to say, it grounds human ontology completely in the mind, or the psyche, or the self-identity, or however you wish to put it. The body is reduced to a malleable, squishy vehicle for the mind, which in itself tells you nothing about what the person really is. This means the question of what you are is completely answered by your psychological self-understanding. If you believe yourself to be a man, that's what you are. If you self-identify as a woman, you are a woman. Period. The nature of one's body has nothing to do with it. Thus, a person with the operator philosophy will see nothing odd in saying some men have vaginas and ovaries, some women have testicles and Adam's apples. From the unitive perspective, that would be like saying some triangles have 5 sides. But in the operator point of view, it makes perfect sense because being a man or woman is just a mode of self-identification. To drive the point home, when a baby is born, it is common to see balloons saying it's a boy or it's a girl. Under the operator point of view, you literally cannot say that. Why not? Because the elements of the baby's psychology have not emerged yet. At most, you can say the baby has male physiology, but whether or not it's a boy or a girl will only be known in time. And it goes without saying that when someone with this ideology encounters gender dysphoria or transgenderism, the default interpretation is that the psychology is completely right and the body is what needs to change, because that person with the male anatomy is really a girl and was unfortunately born into the wrong body. So the body is like something of an ill-fitting piece of clothing or a car that you just can't feel comfortable in. Either way, that's what has to change. Now, I could go on for some time about the internal incoherence of this point of view, or its moral and cultural and even spiritual implications, and in part, I think those implications are a key selling point for those who wish to adopt it, but we'll have to do that some other time. Instead, I'll ask one question. What are the limits of this ontological framework? Again, the operator view says that you and what you are is determined by your psychological self-identification. So if you meet a person with a healthy male body who nonetheless identifies as a woman, you are expected to comply and begin using feminine pronouns for that person. But where does that stop? Can a person, for instance, self-identify as a cat? Can a person who is whiter than the wind-driven snow self-identify as black? Can a 50-year-old man self-identify as a 6-year-old girl? Can a person with 4 intact limbs identify as an amputee? I'm not pulling these from my imagination. There are real people in the world doing all of these things, and they say that they deserve the same respect and recognition as the so-called transgendered. Remember, the body has nothing to do with what a person is, only the psyche. So on what basis can we tell these people that they're wrong? Think about it. How can you say that the white girl who covers herself in fake tan is incorrect, and the fellow who wants to hack off his own limbs is probably distressed and ill? The old man who dresses like a young girl is in denial, and the woman who hisses and meows is probably confused, but the one who wants to replace his genitalia to match his psyche is absolutely correct. How can we hold that double standard? I don't think there's a principled way of doing it. Now, one might say this is all harmless, that those eccentric people can think about themselves whatever they want. After all, it doesn't affect me, or does it? What happens when the law is used to force you to play along? What if the girl who self-identifies as a cat sues you for not having a litter box in the store for her to use, or not allowing her to use her own in your store? What if the court starts saying that you're legally obliged to buy into the idea that she is in fact a cat, and that you have to behave accordingly? Now it does matter to the public, which brings us back to the bathroom fight. In the previous fight about gay marriage, cultural progressives used their considerable power in culture and business and the legal system to redefine marriage so it has nothing to do with men and women. Now they're using their same levers of influence to take the further step to redefine the very concept of men and women to have nothing to do with the body. They want to take their bizarre and incoherent philosophy of human ontology and give it the force of law, to make it the official doctrine of the United States. And the ground zero location for where that is occurring is the public restroom and locker room, particularly the school locker room. This means, among other things, to give an example, imagine you had a strong, athletic young man who is always among the top finishers on the men's swimming team. Then he gets an idea. He says he identifies as a woman, and according to the operator philosophy of human ontology, this unfalsifiable claim grants her the legal right to play on the girls' team where, if the Olympic swimming records are any indication, she will face competitors who are about 10% slower than before. And then, after practice, she can retire to the girls' locker room and change with the women. Because the way progressives see it, that boy is actually a girl, and it would be unjust to not let her join the girls' team and use the girls' locker room just because she happens to have a strong male body. And if you happen to be one of the girls in that locker room and you're not comfortable with this arrangement, or you think it's unfair or bonkers, the Justice Department has a very special message for you. It said in its recent memorandum to all the schools in the nation, it said, "As is consistently recognized in civil rights cases, the desire to accommodate others' discomfort cannot justify a policy that singles out and disadvantages a particular class of students." In other words, if you're uncomfortable and you don't feel safe with this arrangement, you'd better keep your mouth shut, or else you are the enemy of civil rights. You're a bigot, according to the Justice Department, if you're not perfectly comfortable with this situation. So keep your mouth shut, right? Well, what happens, do you suppose, when you tell a nation of immature boys that they have this right, that they have this ability? It doesn't take a genius. Well, let's wrap this up. The reason why people are arguing about bathrooms right now is because it's part of a larger cultural battleground. That fight is regarding the paradigm shift in the way we understand ourselves and one another as human beings. The belief structure being advanced by progressives asserts that you are whatever you believe yourself to be, and the public should be obliged to accommodate, even if it means trampling over the beliefs, privacy, fairness, and safety of others. That is why it's necessary for people who hold to the more natural, common sense, unitive view of the human person to assert themselves while proposing other ways to accommodate people experiencing gender dysphoria. We don't have to accept the progressives' interpretation of these things as the only valid one, and hopefully this video has helped make that clear. For more, see the links in the description below.